Welcome to Agri-Pulse Newsmakers, where we aim to take you to the heart of ag policy. I'm your host, Lydia Johnson. This week's guest is House Ag Committee member and Georgia Congressman Austin Scott, who joins the show to discuss disaster assistance in his state after Hurricane Helene and the Farm Bill. But first, here's this week's headlines. A new trade war with China could hurt American corn and soybean exports, according to a study commissioned by the National Corn Growers Association and the American Soybean Association. The study analyzed the impact on exports of the commodities if China ended existing tariff waivers now in place, and if China imposed 60% tariffs on U.S. products in retaliation for tariffs on Chinese goods. Former President Donald Trump is threatening to impose such tariffs if elected. The study says a 60% retaliatory tariff would result in a loss of over 25 million metric tons of soybean exports to China, and nearly 90% of corn exports to China. Input prices, extreme weather, and changes in commodity prices are some of the top concerns for farmers over the next 2 years. According to a McKinsey and Company poll of 4,400 farmers worldwide, 48% say input prices could be the main risk to their profits. 41% cite the impact of extreme weather or climate events, and 30% are worried about volatility and agricultural commodity prices. Hurricane Milton made landfall in central Florida last week as the fourth hurricane to hit the Sunshine State's agriculture production in 14 months. It damaged citrus and other specialty crops, knocked out power to some dairy farms, and also struck a sizable portion of U.S. phosphate infrastructure. Hurricane Milton hit just weeks after Hurricane Helene's path through the southeastern U.S. USDA announced Tuesday that some producers in the southeast who purchased a hurricane endorsement on their crop insurance payments will be collecting $233 million in indemnities because of Helene's wind speeds. Georgia farmers will receive the largest amount at $207 million. House Agriculture Committee member Representative Austin Scott is a Republican from Georgia who also serves as chairman of the Subcommittee on General Farm Commodities, Risk Management, and Credit. He says both livestock and crop production in his district were impacted by Hurricane Helene.
So there's tremendous damage. If you go into Coffee County or Douglas, you've got about 160 chicken houses that are totally wiped out, that feed an integrator that is the largest employer in the county. It'll take a long time for those houses to get rebuilt and places for the chickens to grow out and again to supply that integrator there. You've got tremendous amount of cotton damage when you go to the east. You've got tremendous amount of timber, pecan orchards. We think that we've lost somewhere close to 50,000 pecan trees, I think is the last number that I saw. And it is, it's just astronomical, the damage. And some of it, a lot of it, especially from the standpoint of timber in the orchards, is generational.
And you, along with the Georgia delegation and more than 30 other lawmakers, wrote a letter asking for disaster aid for those producers affected by Hurricane Debbie, and then another letter for those affected by Hurricane Helene. Can you kind of describe the asks in those letters, and what are the unique impacts to your producers with multiple massive storms triggering these disaster aid payments in such a short amount of time?
Sure. So our ask is kind of threefold. One is, give us time before we go back in and pass a disaster package. Give us time for the land grant institutions to do the damage assessment and give us the actual estimates on the ground, from the land grants who actually know how to do this with their extension agents, again, on the ground in the fields, so that we know what the actual damage is to the crops, and not just the total damage, but kind of the breakdown by commodity group. Then we want to obviously use those numbers to be numbers from the land grant institutions to put together what would be an ag-specific appropriation in the disaster package. And then, and this is where it's key, and this is a lesson learned from Hurricane Michael, we need to make sure that the ag-specific package moves with the global disaster relief package. And what we saw in Hurricane Michael was when the ag package didn't move at the same time, it was approximately 24 months before we were able to get an ag package passed. Times are already tough for the American farmer, regardless of where you are. And I'll tell you, our producers can't survive 24 months without something being done.
And what are you hearing about the size and timing of that disaster aid package?
Well, certainly we expect it to be done before the end of the year. If you look at Georgia alone, Georgia's Direct losses are about $3 billion. Some of that will be insured, and that's again something we'll be waiting on a combination of the university and RMA to give us those numbers. So the loss is much bigger than Michael was for Georgia. I expect it will be much bigger than Michael was for Florida. And so our hope is that we would be done before the end of the year, and that way the block grants can be given out, hopefully to the producers. As soon as we get that money to the states, I would think that within 45 to 60 days, the states could have a formula together to push those funds out to the producers.
We'll be right back with more from Congressman Austin Scott right after this.
Regenerative poultry production is a process by which nature can actually recapture and restore the energy that is being taken out of a space.
Farm Credit helped Rahi build his dream of regenerative poultry farming and encouraging fellow immigrants to find community in agriculture.
Nothing beats a farm. I'm just pursuing happiness.
Learn more at farmcredit.com/beginning.
Biodiesel is clearly the lowest cost, fastest to market product. If we started to make a change to low blends to high blends today, we're going to impact clean air right now instead of waiting for a new technology. We are for innovation. So let's innovate. I don't know what's coming 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, but I know today our fuels can clean the air.
Welcome back. There's still some frustration on Capitol Hill and among farm groups about the way the last disaster aid package was structured, saying it shortchanged farmers with the largest losses. We asked Georgia Congressman Austin Scott what should be done to ensure farmers are fairly compensated when Congress is writing a new disaster aid package.
Nobody's going to be made whole. I don't want to pretend that when we go back to Washington, people are going to come out of this disaster better off than they were before we went in it. But again, from the standpoint of orchards and timber and fruits and vegetables, those things that there really isn't an insurance product for through USDA, the only way to have an equitable treatment to those producers is going to be through the block grants to the states. And so we take those estimates from the land grants that they have tremendous credibility with the producers. They have tremendous credibility with me as a member of Congress and other members of Congress. They give us the numbers that we need to go to the appropriators, people that aren't from our part of the world, and explain to them, why this is an appropriate number for the disaster relief. That number needs to move, and we won't get 100% of it, but what we can get, we need to make sure that appropriation moves specific to agriculture at the same time that FEMA, SBA, and the others move.
And Representative Scott, do you think putting the Farm Bill in with the disaster package eliminates the need to offset the higher spending in the Farm Bill? And do you think this is something that the House would go along with?
Well, I think they're two different issues. I think the disaster package would cover what has happened, up to and until now. The key to the American farmer in the House passed, what we passed to the House Agriculture Committee, is the increased reference prices. And what that does is it sets the value at where, some commodity support would trigger for the American farmer if commodity prices fall a certain percentage below break even. Now, you haven't seen a bill move out of the Senate, and you haven't seen us move the bill across the House floor. And I was a little taken back that I think 4 Democrats on the House Ag Committee voted for the piece of legislation, and the rest of them voted against it. So we haven't had we haven't had the traditional bipartisan support that we would normally have for the Farm Bill coming out of the Democratic Party, and that's been pretty frustrating to me. And some of the accusations that they've made are pretty frustrating to me. Let me say it this way: we don't have a Farm Bill that recognizes the inflation that has occurred in the inputs over the last several years for the American farm family. So if we pass the Farm Bill in November or December when we get back up there, and it recognizes that, and the same thing happened in October of next year, then hopefully the disaster payment wouldn't be as big. But you've still got timber, you've still got orchards, you've still got fruits and vegetables, you've still got a lot of commodities out there that provide tremendous portions of our economy in rural America that you really don't have insurance products for. And even with a good farm bill, it would take a couple of years, I think, before those insurance products hit the market and got to the producer.
Representative Scott, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with our panel discussion. But first, Andrew Hunnicky has a look at Senate races and the upcoming election in this week's Map It Out.
There are 34 Senate seats up for grabs in November, and a few of the close races involve members of the Senate Ag Committee. Right now, Republicans look like they will win control of the Senate since they are currently projected to win all of their seats back and possibly pick up some Democratic seats, including the open seat in West Virginia vacated by Joe Manchin. This map shows all the contested Senate seats in the 2024 election with the most recent data from the Cook Political Report. Blue states are currently projected to be won by a Democrat, while red states are currently projected to be won by a Republican. The states with stripes are considered toss-ups or slightly leaning one direction. We're going to focus on some very close races with Democratic incumbents. In Michigan, Senate Ag Committee Chairwoman Debbie Stabenow is retiring and vacating her seat. The race is considered a toss-up between Democrat Alyssa Slotkin and Republican Mike Rogers. There's another toss-up in Ohio, where incumbent Democrat Sherrod Brown is in a tight race with Republican Bernie Moreno, who's backed by former President Trump. The final toss-up features Wisconsin Senator Tammy Baldwin against Republican Eric Hovde. Baldwin is not on the Senate Ag Committee, but she was leading by a substantial margin during the summer, and now the race is very close. The Cook Political Report currently has the Montana race as leaning Republican. Democratic incumbent John Tester is currently projected to lose his race against businessman Tim Sheehy. For Agri-Pulse, I'm Andrew Hunnicky.
Farmers are always there for each other. We shed tears together, we celebrate together, but we also grow together. Farm Bureau is the largest general farm organization in the country. We have the farmers' back. If you're a farmer and you're not a member, we would welcome you into our Farm Bureau family. And if you want to know more about agriculture, come be part of this great family.
The Senate and House Ag Committees are busy working on the next farm bill, which will cover commodities, specialty crops, livestock, and more. This legislation will impact every farmer, rancher, and rural business for the next 5 years. Make sure you don't miss any of the insights and analytics that Agri-Pulse and its top-notch team of well-connected experts can provide. Register today for a free trial at agripulse.com and click the subscribe button, or email us at pam@agri-pulse.com. You won't want to miss this farm bill coverage.
Welcome back. This week's panel will focus on USDA assistance during the recent hurricanes and phosphate infrastructure damaged by the storms. We're joined by Josh Linville, Vice President of Fertilizer at StoneX, and John Berge, Deputy Administrator for Farm Programs at the USDA Farm Service Agency. John, we'll start with you today. What assistance is USDA providing on the ground for producers after multiple hurricanes?
The very first thing that producers are interested in doing is starting cleanup. And so we directed our state staff and our field staff to implement ECP and EFRP. Generally, those programs are determined at the county level. We directed them to go ahead and start administering those programs. We provided on-site inspection waivers and also waivers of certain review of the cleanup that was going to be done. So surface debris cleanup could start immediately. We also implemented a number of strategies with regard to livestock indemnity in the Emergency Livestock Assistance Program, providing assistance for animals that were lost due to these storms. Also for feed transportation, both feed to animals and animals to feed. We're also providing for water transportation. Those flexibilities are important to make sure that animals are being taken care of. We waived a number of different loss notification deadlines for both of those programs, moving those to January and March respectively. We also waived some of the loss notifications under the Non-Insured Disaster Assistance Program, commonly known as NAP. So we've flexed all of those items. In addition to that, we streamlined our disaster declaration process to ensure that declarations were made timely both through the presidential disaster declaration process, but then in counties that were not captured in that process, we also flexed what is called the administrator's physical loss notification process, both of which then trigger emergency loans so that people can get access to low interest financing to help put their lives back together.
We're seeing repeated damage with multiple hurricanes in the same area over a relatively short amount of time. Are producers with storm damage beginning to tap into more FSA loans?
There's a bit of a lag time in collecting real tangible data, but we are certainly seeing a lot of traffic into our offices in that space. I don't know that I can give you a specific number, but it's a good tool to be able to use in the short term to leverage those financing dollars. The interest rate on an emergency loan is 3.75%. So it's an attractive opportunity for people to utilize that for short-term financing to get back on their feet.
And Josh, pulling you into the discussion here, over 60% of phosphate produced domestically comes from Florida. What infrastructure was damaged by the storm, and is this something that farmers around the country should be worried about?
Yeah, this is a storm that obviously when Helene came through, it was more of a glancing blow, but because of its proximity to the phosphate production, they had to stop those mines, they had to stop that production line, had to send their workers home to their families, so we lost time there. Milton was a direct shot. Now, unfortunately for the folks in the path, it dipped south just a little bit more than what it looked like. For phosphate and for Tampa Bay proper, they were fortunate that the storm dipped south about 35 miles. That 35-mile differential is the difference between all the water getting sucked out of Tampa Bay and 10 to 15-foot storm surge, which would have more than likely caused pretty decent damage to these facilities. So we don't believe there has been any structural damage to the production down in that region outside of Tampa. We've not heard anything official, and it's important to say that we are still waiting for official word from the company. However, when you look at all of the different reports coming in from different industries down there, everybody's kind of the same. No major damage, we got off lucky, these types of situations. But we have still lost production because we always look at it from just a structural point of view. What we don't look at, what we kind of seem to forget, is that the facility doesn't matter if you don't have electricity. The facility doesn't matter if you don't have water. The facility does not run if your workers are still at home, cleaning up their property, cleaning up their neighbors, helping friends and family. And that's what we think has been going on. This cleanup continues in the area. We should be seeing these plants come back online. We believe one of the three have done just that. But again, we're waiting for the official word.
We'll be right back with more of our panel discussion right after this.
It's not as simple just to wake up one day and go, I want to be a conservation farmer. You're changing how your farming practice is done. You're changing your operation.
Farm Credit supported John and Kelly Watley as they shifted to more sustainable farming, improving the environment where they farm and live. Learn more at farmcredit.com/climate.
Biodiesel is clearly the lowest cost, fastest to market product. If we started to make a change to low blends to high blends today, we're going to impact clean air right now instead of waiting for a new technology. We are for innovation. So let's innovate. I don't know what's coming 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, but I know today our fuels can clean the air.
Welcome back. We're getting close to fall fertilizer application season. We asked Josh Linville with StoneX what he's seen phosphate prices do since Hurricane Milton made landfall.
Unfortunately, they've been appreciating. And this is something we expected to see happen regardless of Milton. When we looked at the world, global values were high. And in fact, when we looked at NOLA DAP margins, which is what we typically base our North American values on, we were cheap versus the other global buyers like Brazil and India on a delivered basis. And so we expected to see that gap start to close. Milton obviously kind of thrust that story ahead, but now all of a sudden we're getting very close to it. And not only do we have a very tight situation globally, we've now got a tighter global situation going on here at home in North America. And we're starting to expect demand to be better than what we had originally thought. Prices are extremely high versus historicals, versus grain values. And we thought that was going to cause some demand destruction. And we still do, but not quite to the same extent. We're hearing reports from across the Midwest, from across the nation. Everybody is saying my yields are looking better than what I expected them to be. And now the expectation might have been poor, but it's still better.
And John, there was nearly $7 billion worth of insured crops in the region hit by the hurricanes. We know it's still early, but do you have a sense yet of the losses that aren't covered by crop insurance and what farmers may expect from a disaster aid package?
We're working with our state leadership to determine what losses outside of crop insurance coverage might be out there, the uncovered losses, and we anticipate that that's going to be pretty significant. We've had a number of discussions internally about things that we could do with our own standing disaster programs, those flexibilities that I mentioned earlier. I know that there's a lot of discussions going on Capitol Hill, also with stakeholders on what a supplemental program may look like. And our job is to essentially inform those decisions with disaster assessments, what may be needed and what we could move quickly, whether it's an ad hoc emergency relief program style a program, or whether it's something else that Congress might come up with. So we are informing that process. I believe that we will have some more clarity on loss assessments in the coming days, and we'll be sharing that with our leadership so that we can make some determinations on what we do next.
And Josh, what's the current state of global phosphate inventory, and how could this storm affect that? And most importantly, what could this do to fertilizer costs?
Just another hickey. When you look at the global phosphate market, it really comes down to 5 nations. And so it's just not as spread out as what we see for things like potash. It's not spread out as things like nitrogen. There's relatively few major players out there, and the U.S. is one of them. So again, when you look at the world, Chinese exports have continued to be restricted, continue to be tighter than normal for much of 2024. India, who's the world's largest buyer, their stockpiles got dangerously low, and they're now starting to play catch up on rebuilding those stockpiles.
John and Josh, thank you both so much for joining us today. We'll be right back with more Agri-Pulse Newsmakers. But first, Andrew Huneke has more on the most recent Global Agriculture Productivity Report in this week's Ag by the Numbers.
There is not enough agricultural productivity to meet the demands of feeding nearly 10 billion people by 2050, according to the latest Global Agricultural Productivity Report. The report cites total factor productivity, a measurement of increased producer output while using the same or less inputs, like land, labor, or fertilizer. This chart shows the original TFP target growth rate, the revised target growth rate, and the current annual growth rate. When the report was first published in 2010, it estimated that average annual TFP growth would need to be 1.73%. However, TFP growth was slower than anticipated by 2013 and 2022, indicated by the dotted blue line. The report now estimates a revised growth of more than 2% to achieve sustainable production of global agricultural needs by 2050, which is indicated by the dotted green line. The report offers 6 policy investment priorities to fix the slowdown, including investing in agricultural innovation systems, expanding market access, strengthening regional and global trade, and reducing loss and improving the quality of outputs. For Agri-Pulse, I'm Andrew Huneke.
Farmers are always there for each other. We shed tears together, we celebrate together, but we also grow together. Farm Bureau is the largest general farm organization in the country. We have the farmers' back. If you're a farmer and you're not a member, we would welcome you into our Farm Bureau family. And if you want to know more about agriculture, come be part of this great family.
Looking closer, seeing further. That's how we do it. At Curious Plot, we're driven to find what's next for agriculture, animal care, and food. We stay curious because that's what it takes to grow understanding. That's how we plot strategies and tell stories that get results time after time. Marketing, communications, and consulting that look closer and see further. Curious Plot. We can't wait to help you tell your story.
Welcome back. Before we let you go, here's what's on the horizon for the upcoming week. The 97th National FFA Convention and Expo will begin Wednesday, where more than 70,000 FFA members from across the country are expected to join together in Indianapolis. USDA will release multiple monthly reports, including cattle on feed, milk production, and chicken and eggs report. And Election Day is just a few short weeks away on November 5th. Early voting has opened in some states. As always, stay tuned for the latest on this and more at agripulse.com. For Agri-Pulse Newsmakers, I'm Lydia Johnson. Thanks for watching.
Newsmakers is a production of Agri-Pulse Communications. You can also find our new content on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to follow Agri-Pulse and our correspondents on social media to get breaking news and more. For agriculture, trade, food, environment, and regulatory news, your source is agripulse.com.